the Texas Longhorns should be in the college football playoff. So when these rankings come out, if they've already come out, then you probably already have, or not probably, you already know what happened then. But we believe right now, at the time of us recording this, Texas should be and will be a top 4 team. Now, that can be, true about a team making a playoff, but what about making a playoff run? Well, I think Texas is extremely scary for whoever they draw for a number of reasons we'll talk about right now. But first things first, make sure you're subscribed right here to the On3 YouTube channel. Texas Longhorn fans, y'all are pressing towards the SEC and trying to get to the SEC with a little bit of hardware behind your name, maybe a nice little college football playoff trophy. The same way that you're pressing towards that, we're pressing towards 200K subs on this channel. So would appreciate y'all being dialed in. Thank you to y'all that are already dialed in. We're very glad to have y'all a part of this. Also, make sure you follow me on Twitter and Instagram at JDPakel. So when I look at Texas and I look at the potential college football playoff matchups for them, there really isn't a matchup where I just feel like Texas is overpowered or outgunned or anything like that. I think Texas as a whole should feel pretty good about their chances in any scenario. And the reason why I feel that way is I think they're made up of a lot of the right things. Like, let's start on the line of scrimmage, because that'd be the one spot where you say, hey, man, sorry, you got to have the big human beings. Look at TCU last year. In that game against Georgia, it was clear who had the sirloin and who had, maybe not so much the big boys needed up front. Texas, I think, would be able to play with anybody on the line of scrimmage. By nature of what they've done to this point in the year, they are 308 and 360 pounds respectively at that defensive tackle position, so they're not going to be just pushed back, I don't believe. Also, by nature of what they've done statistically, they are running for 5 yards a carry on the season, good for top 25 in the country. They're only allowing, I think it's somewhere around 2.9 yards a carry, good for top 10 in the country. Y'all, they're legit on the line of scrimmage. There's not going to be a scenario where they're just overpowered in that position group, which we've seen be an issue for some teams when it comes to conference versus conference play. Also, they're not getting out-weaponed. Like, if it becomes a shootout for Texas, I look across the board there and I say, take away one of those guys, we got 2 others or 3 others that can hurt you. Take away Adonai Mitchell, Xavier Worthy's there. Jordan Whittington's there. Jatavian Sanders is there. And you kind of just go down the line here. We talk about the Big 12 title game for Texas. They had 10 different dudes catch a pass from Quinn Ewers. That's saying something. Okay, they have the weapons to, if they got into a game against, let's say, a Washington, or let's say, I don't know who you would even draw next. Let's say they played a Florida State. Again, we don't know the rankings at this point in time, but let's just say they played a Washington, because Washington, I think, is pretty much a lock for being in the playoff. I think they could score with Washington. I'm not predicting a winner in that game. I'm just saying I think you would have to feel good about your chances if it became a shootout. You don't feel concerned about that. Now, on the flip side, let's say you drew Michigan, and it becomes ugly, gross, line of scrimmage kind of game. I think you can play that kind of game as well. And when we look at also when it comes to the playoff, like, talent is the price of admission to get into the college football playoff. Like, everybody that you play in that top 4, they're all talented. That's not new. That's not breaking anything. That's not really novel analysis. Everyone's talented when you get to the college football playoff. So what makes the difference in those spots? I think it's poise. I think it's maturity. Some of it's probably experience, but that was what won Georgia the last 2 national titles. Was you had someone in Stetson Bennett who just didn't flinch. And yes, the defense was incredible that first time they won the national title in 2021, but in 2022, I went back to where they were experienced at. That was the OC, the play caller, and that was their quarterback, Stetson Bennett. Now, Quinn Ewers hasn't been in a college football playoff-like setting, but Steve Sarkisian has as an OC for Bama. And Quinn Ewers, I think, has been borderline unflappable to this point in the season. Even when he didn't play well against Oklahoma, I didn't see him flinch. So when it comes to those big spots for Texas, they'd have the talent to hang around. But I think the poise, too, from the quarterback position, from the OC, head coach position, rather, and when it comes to what they have across the board, this is a mature team. Not just by nature of what they've had to endure this season. That actually probably is a greater point. They've had to endure different tests and different stresses from not having your starting quarterback, from having to play in a lot of close games, having to find a way to win. But also a lot of upperclassmen. Like, the majority of the guys that start for Texas are juniors and seniors. That means something. I think that provides a little bit of a lower degree of variance when you get into those big spots. You're not going to have so much deer in the headlights from Texas. Now, I would also say this, and we said this on a previous video, but I want to make sure we echo it. Texas, when you get to the college football playoff, a lot of what we're doing is speculating and giving hypotheticals on how a team would perform against another team, because we don't have a ton of basis to go off of what a SEC team looks like versus an ACC team, or a Big 12 team versus a Pac-12 team, or what have you. Again, we don't know the rankings, so if that doesn't fit, it is what it is. But going back to what Texas is, I think it's not just hypothetical with them. Because whether Bama makes the college football playoff or not, I think Bama, from a roster perspective, presents as much a challenge as anybody would in the country for Texas. And Texas beat them by double digits at their place. And it's probably a big reason why Texas is in the college football playoff, or we're assuming so. So we said a lot about Bama and how they've progressed over the course of the season. That's true. But I think Texas continuing to find ways to win and playing their best ball when it matters right now. Hanging 50-plus on Texas Tech. Blowing out Oklahoma State. They're confident. They're in rhythm. They're playing their best football. And I think a lot of that, too, goes back to Steve Sarkisian and the way that he's kind of constructed that culture to be playing how they're playing now, to have the standard they have right now. Kind of reminds you of one of his former bosses. Just saying. So, Texas, again, I fully expect them to be in the playoff, and I fully expect them to make some noise in the playoff. I'm excited to see what they do. I think they're dangerous by nature of matchups, by nature of style they can play, by nature of who they have playing quarterback. Like, I don't see a lot of weaknesses across the board here. I don't see a lot of matchups here that make me nervous when I see Texas and I match them up against any and whatever team you want to talk about there. So, again, the rankings may already be out by the time you watch this, so let me know what you think about Texas and their matchup here for likely their college football playoff opponent. If they're not in the college football playoff, and we're talking about this at some point, and you're watching it later on a Sunday, like, I would have a lot of questions for the committee. But nevertheless, we will cross those bridges when they get here. Make sure you're subscribed, because we're going to talk about those bridges with Texas going forward on this channel. We appreciate y'all. We love y'all. We're going to keep this party rolling. We will see y'all next time. Hey y'all, thanks so much for watching. Subscribe to the channel here to make sure you don't miss an episode of The Hard Count. Also be sure to check out other videos on the On3 YouTube channel.